Hello, everyone. We are going to get started shortly here at the National D-Day Memorial. We're so excited you guys are joining us today. Just to bear with us for a little bit, we are doing this off of an iPad versus our normal setup. So let us know where you're watching from and who all is watching with you, and we'll get started in just a little bit. Okay, guys, just bear with us for a little bit. We want to give some time for everyone to log in. We will get started in about 5 minutes. Is everyone able to hear me all right? I know this is not our usual setting, so. While we're waiting, I guess I can talk about the little tin can looking things behind me here. Those green round buildings, those are actually called Quonset huts. We currently use them for office space in our gift store. We also have one that is used as an outdoor picnic pavilion as well. But those would have been very popular during World War II to house troops in, especially in England. So. Perfect. Well, welcome Olivia and Nick. We're so excited you guys have joined us today. Like I said, we'll get started shortly, and we'll be giving a tour of the National D-Day Memorial. It is an absolutely beautiful day. The only thing that we're going to have issues with is going to be the wind. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But yeah. Now, how many of you guys who are watching have been to the National D-Day Memorial before? Feel free to tell me in the chat feature as well, where you guys are watching from, and if you visited, when you visited. I know a lot of folks visit as a part of a field trip. Some come up for our events. We have ceremonies, family-friendly events that we have throughout the year too. So I know this year's a little bit different than most, so we do understand that. So that's why we're trying to bring you guys as much virtual content as possible. So it looks like Nick visited in 2013. Awesome. That was actually the year I started here at the National D-Day Memorial. Started out as an intern in 2013, May of 2013 to be exact. So awesome. So we have about 3 more minutes and we'll get started very shortly. Our Director of Education, John Long, will be giving the tour, and I'll be chiming in to fill in some of the space, because if you've visited before, you know this is a lot of walking, especially in between the most important things. So we'll be giving you guys a lot of content, a lot of context too. So really looking forward to this. So about 2 more minutes. Just keep holding tight. We'll get started shortly. So. So again, if you have just tuned in, you're going to be taking a virtual tour of the National D-Day Memorial in just a little bit. We are using an iPad for this, so please bear with us as the wind's going to wreak havoc with the sound at times. Right now it's not too bad, but the wind has been gusting pretty heavily at points. If you can go down into the chat feature located at the bottom of your screen, or if you're watching on iPad, it'll be towards the top. And let us know where you're watching from and who all is watching with you. And also if you've ever visited the memorial before. Things may look a little different. 2013 for Nick, you're gonna see something new at the very beginning. So we've added a few new things in the past 7 years. So looking forward to having you guys join us in that, and we will get started in just a few seconds. Perfect. So it's like we have Tennessee watching. Awesome. Pretty close neighbor. Well, it is 1 o'clock, so it is time for us to begin. I'm going to switch views in just a second, and we will get started with today's tour.
Welcome, everyone, to the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. It's a beautiful day here in Bedford. It's spring. Leaves are coming out. Red buds are out. The flowers are starting to appear, so it's a great day to take a tour. But it is a little bit breezy, so we apologize in advance if the wind sound covers up our audio every now and then. We'll try to do the best we can. My name is John Long. I am the Director of Education here at the D-Day Memorial, and I'm joined by my colleague, Maggie Hartley, who is behind the camera at the moment. Every now and then she will chime in with some commentary as well as she shows you around the memorial. It's going to be a little bit of a walk. And let me say also from the beginning, there's a lot more to this memorial than we'll be able to cover in this tour. So I invite you to come back in better days when everything is open for business again and travel is allowed. Hope you'll come back and see the memorial in its full beauty and full power, because this is a very poignant place where you can learn a lot about the history of D-Day and the ones who secured our freedom by storming the beaches on June 6, 1944. I'm going to start our tour here at one of my favorite sculptures on site. This is Homage, which is a tribute to the Bedford Boys. Why is the National D-Day Memorial national memorial to a great international event in a little town of Bedford, Virginia, of all places? The answer is because of the Bedford Boys. Company A, 116th Regiment, 29th Division. They were some of the first men to land on D-Day, and because they landed in the right place and at the right time when really not many other people did, it meant the entire German defenses were aimed right at them, and it was simply devastating for Company A. Of the men from Bedford who landed on D-Day, 20 were killed probably in the first 15 or 20 minutes of the invasion. 19 of those men were from Company A, 1 man from Bedford and Company F, but 20 men from a small community of Bedford, Virginia, made the ultimate sacrifice. That is considered to be the highest per capita losses of any American community on D-Day itself, and it's the reason why this community was chosen as the site for the National D-Day Memorial. We pay tribute, of course, to the Bedford Boys, but we are the National D-Day Memorial, paying tribute to all of the Allied personnel who were part of Operation Overlord. Operation Overlord was, of course, the invasion of Normandy from England across the English Channel in order to secure the liberation of France and ultimately the victory in World War II over the Germans. This operation was planned for years, really before the United States was even in the war. The British were trying to figure out how to get across the English Channel to win this war against Nazi Germany. And everyone knew from the beginning it was going to be a very difficult operation. And amphibious assaults coming out of the water and coming up onto land, that is always one of the most difficult operations in the military playbook. And this one in particular had to be so carefully planned by its leaders because it was really a risky operation. This was, we consider it, of course, a great victory with a beautiful memorial in Bedford, but that was not a foregone conclusion. This very easily could have been one of the greatest defeats in American history and world history. And the more planning and thought that goes into this, the more chance of success we're going to have. Our lower garden here that we're walking through is dedicated to the planning stage of Operation Overlord. And the garden is surrounded by the busts of some of the Allied leaders. This is General Omar Bradley, who's going to command the American ground forces. Coming up here is Admiral Bertram Ramsay, a British admiral who's in charge of the naval forces. We'll say a little bit more about the Navy on D-Day in a little while. And then coming up, this man with the pipe is British Air Marshal Arthur Tedder, who is actually the Deputy Supreme Commander, second in command of the operation. And man, Churchill called the nuts and bolts guy. He's the one that can put together all the million details that are needed for this operation. But of course, the man in charge of the operation and overall command was a name you probably recognize, General Dwight David Eisenhower, an American general who was given command of Operation Overlord after successful invasions in North Africa in 1942, Sicily and Italy in 1943, and now in command of this cross-channel invasion. Eisenhower was the right man for the job in many ways. He wasn't the battlefield genius of some of the other generals, perhaps, but he was a great coalition leader who could figure out how to take this multinational coalition, 12 different nations participating in the invasion, and keep it together, pointed in the right direction, and successful in its operation. General Eisenhower was, say, the right man for the job because a lot of the other generals just could not have pulled that off and kept the operation successful. General Eisenhower, the sculpture of General Eisenhower here is taken from a photograph you may have seen before. If not, just Google Eisenhower paratroopers. Picture Eisenhower speaking to a group of paratroopers who are beginning to get on the planes and jump into France on the eve of the invasion. And he has a group gathered around him. It's often said in history books when that picture is shown that he has given some great inspirational speech. In fact, we know what he was talking about from the oral history of one of the participants. He was talking about fishing. Put a fly rod there in his hand. The whole thing makes a lot more sense. And I would contend that casual conversation about fishing with his men probably put them more at ease than a great inspirational speech did. Eisenhower seemed very at ease and very confident. In fact, though, he was a wreck. He understood that what it was going to cost to get across those beaches or to send these paratroopers into France. And he had been told that by the end of the day, 70% of those paratroopers he was addressing would be killed, captured, or wounded. Didn't prove to be that high, but that was the expectation that he had. So you can imagine how he felt as he speaks to these men and tries to give them the confidence to go forward, knowing that many of them will not live another 24 hours. Eisenhower was in charge of an organization called SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. And Scaife was tasked with planning and carrying out this operation. We've already met some of the generals that helped Eisenhower plan it. And as we walk around the garden, we'll see a little bit more. As I say, the garden is dedicated to the planning stage for Scaife. And if we could get up above with a drone, you could see that the whole garden is actually shaped like the Scaife patch that you'll see in just a moment. This is Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the great British general who is in charge of the British ground forces, really an overall command of all of the ground forces for the invasion. Another British Air Marshal, Trafford Leigh-Mallory, is in charge of the Air Forces. And we'll also say a little bit more about the Air Forces in a minute. And our final of the 6 busts around the garden is Walter Beadle Smith, who was Eisenhower's chief of staff, his confidant, his friend, and in many ways sort of the hatchet man. Eisenhower, remember, is the likable, affable kind of general. I like Ike becomes his presidential slogan later on. And most people did like Ike. He was just the kind of get along sort of general. But occasionally in the Army, someone needs to have their head bitten off because they've done something wrong. They're in trouble. Ike wasn't typically the guy that bit your head off. He sent Smith to do it. So Eisenhower is very popular. Smith is a little less popular, but very effective in helping to plan this operation. I said a moment ago that Eisenhower did not give those paratroopers a great inspirational speech, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have one. He actually has a message for each one of the Allied personnel getting ready for the invasion, and it's called his Order of the Day. It's what's recorded here on this giant plaque. Starts out, soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which you have striven these many months. Eisenhower wanted to explain to these men why he was asking them to risk their lives, crossing those beaches, jumping out of those airplanes, and he wanted them to know what was at stake. So if you look at some of the words that he uses in his Order of the Day, and again, you can Google the full text sometimes and read it, but he talks about tyranny, oppression in Europe caused by the Nazi Germany versus liberty, freedom for ourselves, and security in a free world. In other words, he paints this as very much a black and white fight of good versus evil, because that's how Eisenhower saw the battle. That's what he wanted the men to understand, that this was the great crusade to free not only Europe, but the world by ending the threat of Nazi Germany. He closes it out by telling his men, I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Sounds very confident, certainly, but remember, Eisenhower is not as confident as he appears. In his pocket on D-Day is a small handwritten note that is, in essence, a press release to be issued if the invasion fails. It says, in essence, that the invasion has failed, I've withdrawn the troops, and I take full responsibility for the failure, which would have ended his career, of course. Now, as we know, Eisenhower doesn't have to issue that press release. He doesn't have to release that note because the invasion is not a failure. But the fact that he has it in his pocket on D-Day says a lot about his mindset as he's getting ready. He understands this could be a great defeat, not a great victory. Okay, so we leave the garden now. We're going to go up a flight of steps into our middle plaza, which represents the invasion itself. We're in the planning stage now. As we go up the steps, we will be getting ready for the invasion. And as we get up here, there'll also be a lot more background noise as we get closer to our beach scene. So I'll try to speak loudly, but again, pardon us if the sound kind of gets a little wonky here and there. And we're going to stop here right at the entrance to the middle plaza. because the sound does get a lot louder. The background noise gets a lot louder as you get closer to the water. And talk about the invasion itself. The plaza, one of the first things you'll notice is that the concrete behind me is tinted blue because it represents the English Channel. It's divided into 5 sections, which represents the 5 beaches on which the Allies are going to land on D-Day. The Americans are going to land at Utah and Omaha Beach. The British and Canadians at Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. 5 different beach landings. We're going to land a total of about 150,000 men on D-Day itself. The hardest part of that operation is going to be actually getting them from the water into the land. That is where an amphibious assault is always the riskiest and where we anticipate we will lose the most lives. Because picture that scene as you're getting out of a landing craft, coming across through the water and across the beach. You can't really defend yourself. You're a target now more than a fighting man. You'll see that in just a moment when we get to the beach scene, and you'll see one soldier coming through the water with his rifle held up here above his head. If my rifle is up here, what am I not doing? I'm not firing it. I'm not defending myself. As I say, I'm a target now more than a fighting man. We've got to figure out a way to get as many people across that beach as we can with as low a cost as possible. And one of the men who helps to figure out how to do that is a New Orleans boat builder by the name of Andrew Jackson Higgins, who developed what's called the Higgins boats. These are the landing craft with the drop-down ramp in the front. You'll see a representation in just a minute. As you come up right to the edge of the beach, the ramp drops, and the men on that landing craft then have to go off the ramp, through the water, and onto the beach as quickly as possible. There are a lot of problems developed with this, however. As the landing craft are coming across the English Channel closer to the shore, they are under fire. German artillery is opened up, German machine guns as they get even closer to the shore. The Germans had dug some runnels, some ditches under the water line for this very purpose. And so some of the men stepped off of the ramp of their landing craft into water over their head. And the average man on D-Day is carrying 70, 80, 90 pounds of equipment on his back. You can imagine what's going to happen. It's going to take a man with 90 pounds on his back and drop him in water over his head. He's going to do one of 2 things. He's either going to lose his back to try to get to the surface, or he's going to drown. Many men get drowned on D-Day. Meanwhile, as soon as the ramp opens up, the Germans have opened fire with their machine guns from their bunkers above the beach. Our bunkers is represents the German defenses there. You can imagine how costly this operation became. And in fact, you can see that visually right here with our plaques, our necrology wall, where we list the name of every Allied soldier, sailor, and airman, Coast Guardsman that we know died on D-Day itself. On this side with the American flags are the names of 2,502 Americans who died on D-Day. On the opposite side with the other nations' flags are the names of 1,913 men from Allied nations who died on D-Day. So it's over 4,015 men who died just on D-Day itself, and that's just the ones we know. We're confident that other men died on D-Day as well, but the military records were often confused, and they were often given a different death date depending on just when a body was found in some cases. But even so, that's a very costly loss. All right, we're going to cross now the English Channel, the blue tinted concrete. And as we get closer to our beach scene, let's say it gets a lot louder. So we'll let Maggie comment a little bit on what she sees and likes to point out. But to say, excuse the background noise as the water effects are very, very effective in getting across what's happening on the beach, but also a little bit noisy for our purposes today.
So right now we are walking towards the Higgins boat. Now this one is made out of granite. What it mostly would have been made out of is plywood. And it's gonna have to fit over 30 men inside of it. Now, as you hear these loud noises, you can only imagine, this is just a glimpse of what was going on D-Day itself. So as you see, the water shoots up. It's hard to predict this from on a random schedule. So you'll see the water pop up. That's representing the different explosions that are going on, the machine gun fire. And if you look over to the side, you're going to see something that looks like a jack. Now this right here is called a hedgehog. It was originally designed to stop tanks from moving forward on to land, but the Germans decided to use it as a part of the Atlantic Wall, as an obstacle that could rip open the bottoms of boats. Sometimes they had mines placed on them as well. Now what we're going to do, we're going to transition over to our naval section, because obviously with this being an amphibious invasion, the Navy's going to play a major role in what's going on D-Day. And don't worry, we'll get close-ups of the statues that are on the beach and that are scaling the wall in just a little bit.
Okay, this circle is our Navy Plaza, where we pay tribute to the naval forces on D-Day and the Coast Guard. A lot of people don't realize that the United States Coast Guard was also part of the invasion. But remember, this is an amphibious assault. It's crossing the English Channel, coming out of the water onto the land. No one is getting to that beach without the support of the navies. And I say navies plural because it's not just the American Navy. In fact, more ships come from Britain, but ships from several other nations are participating as well. And they're absolutely crucial to the success. As I say, no one is getting anywhere near France if we don't command the water, we don't command the English Channel. Fortunately, we do. The German Navy is just a shadow of what it had been, and no great threat to the Allies on D-Day itself. Nonetheless, still going to be a costly operation for the Navy. About 175 American sailors are killed on D-Day. We're going to cross the bridge in just a minute, and the noise there is with water effects is pretty considerable. So let me talk just a minute about our biggest sculpture on the site, which is called Climbing the Wall. And it brings to mind immediately American Rangers who participated in the assault on a place called Pointe du Hoc. Pointe du Hoc is between the American beaches of Utah and Omaha, and atop that cliff were German gun emplacements, where if the German guns opened up fire, they could hit Utah Beach, they could hit Omaha Beach, they could hit these ships in the channel. The Allied planners understood in putting the invasion together, those guns had to be silenced. And so they sent a team of American Rangers to land on the beach, cross the beach, scale those nearly vertical cliffs by climbing ropes, and then to take out those German guns. It's often said that they wasted their effort because they got up to those gun emplacements and the guns weren't there. That's not entirely true the way it's said, because the guns were there. They had simply been pulled back away from the gun emplacements to protect them from aerial bombardment and naval gunnery. The Rangers did find those guns later in the day and disabled them. And that was crucial because this was the high ground above the battlefield. And if they did not seize Pointe du Hoc, the whole invasion could have failed. So the Rangers paid a high cost for it, but they did their duty, and that was important. But having said that, as you look at the sculpture as we cross in just a minute, Maggie shows it to you close up. Think of it more symbolically. The sculptor, who was a man named Jim Brothers, who did much of our sculpture, Jim Brothers didn't intend it to represent just the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc. He wanted you to think of all of the World War II generation climbing their way to victory. And when you think of it that way as a symbolic piece, when we get to the top and talk about the end of the story, the symbolism will make a little more sense. So we're going to walk across, and there's going to be a lot of background noise, but you'll get a closer view at the beach scene and the sculpture.
Okay, guys, I didn't want to talk because I do know that it's so loud as we walk through that space. So we just left the beach scene and now we're coming over to the air component. So take it away, John.
Hey, this is our aerial plaza. The other side is dedicated to the Navy. This side is dedicated to the Air Forces of D-Day. Also an important part of the story. I said no one is getting to the beach if we don't control the sea. No one is staying on the beach if we don't control the air. And this was very important. Unfortunately, the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, it was called, had been decimated by 1944 and really presented very little challenge on D-Day. However, we didn't know that until afterwards. We were very worried about the German air power and whether they would be able to stop the invasion. The Allied Air Forces are doing a lot of important jobs. They're dropping bombs on enemy positions. They are dropping the paratroopers back behind the beaches to secure bridges and crossroads and to help to disrupt the German responses. And the Air Forces are also conducting very important reconnaissance. In other words, looking out for the enemy and reporting back where there are problems. And that's what our plane is here. This is an L-3 Grasshopper, a reconnaissance plane that would have been used by the Allies really just to look for the enemy. If you notice, it is doesn't have any guns. It's not a big plane. It only seats 2 people, and that's because this is not a warplane per se. It's not designed to fight. It is designed to fly over the enemy positions and radio back that there are German guns on that hill or German tanks coming up this road, so that we could meet that threat. And this was very important because having our eyes in the sky gave us a great advantage on D-Day itself. Now you can imagine the Germans want to shoot down this plane because it's radioing with their locations. But you can also imagine we don't want to shoot down our own planes. And for that reason, Allied aircraft on D-Day are all painted, about 11,000 aircraft painted with these recognition stripes that you see on the wings and the tail. White, black, white stripes. This recognition symbol is only for Operation Overlord, and it's designed so that our men can immediately recognize that this is a friendly plane and avoid shooting it down. In previous battles, that has been a problem, as Allies have shot down many of their own planes by mistake. Fortunately, that is much less of a problem in part due to the stripes. And we carry that forward, by the way. If you look up at March, you'll see the white, black stripes there as well. And so we have got the ground forces coming across the beach doing their job. We've got the paratroopers landing in France and doing their job. We've got the naval forces transporting the troops. They're doing their job, and the Air Force is helping to protect the landings, all doing their job. What's left to find out is who wins. And so as we climb the hill here, we'll be heading up to the end of the story, our Victory Plaza, where we're going to find out, of course, the Allies are successful on D-Day. Against all the odds, we get assured the Germans, as Maggie mentioned a little while ago, the Germans had spent years and enormous resources constructing what they called the Atlantic Wall to stop this invasion that they knew was coming. They didn't know where it would be or when it would be. They knew we were going to invade at some point across the English Channel. And so they had built enormous defenses to stop the invasion. And it was a great question whether they would be able to stop us or not. Well, by the end of D-Day, June 6, 1944, we had breached the Atlantic Wall, broken through those defenses on all 5 of the beaches, even on Omaha Beach, which was the most costly of all of the beaches. And that meant the German effort put into the Atlantic Wall was entirely pointless. It lasted less than 24 hours on all 5 of our beaches. And so now as we come up to our Victory Plaza at the top, most noticeable thing you'll see, our signature landmark is our arch. The arch, the Overlord Arch, is 44 feet, 6 inches high to reflect the date, June 6, 1944. And it is symbolic of victory because going back to ancient Roman times, when the Roman army would win a victory, they would build an arch to commemorate it. And so as you look at the arch, think of the end of the story, not just victory on D-Day, but ultimate victory in the war itself. However, that's going to be a long way in the future. D-Day was not the end of the war. We have 11 months of fighting after D-Day before we win the war in Europe. We're also, remember, fighting in the Pacific against the Japanese, and it'll be 3 more months after that before we win the war in the Pacific. It's going to be a costly campaign, but D-Day was an important step toward that ultimate victory. Now, I said down below when we talked about the climbing the wall sculpture to think of it symbolically as the World War II generation climbing their way to victory. And now that we're at the top and we look at a machine gunner there face to face, we see some of the symbolism as well. You notice, first of all, he's not yet to the top. He's not there yet. He's getting there, but he still has a little way to go before he's climbed that wall. And that's symbolic of the fact that D-Day was, of course, only part of the way. We still have a lot before we can claim victory. But you notice what's on victory, remember, represented by the arch. So he's looking ahead toward victory. But you notice what is in between there. This piece known as the final tribute. And you may have noticed that was also part of homage back when we started our tour. It's a rifle with a bayonet affixed, stuck into the ground, a helmet on top of it. This is a soldier's grave. When a man died in World War II, he would be buried in this and grave marked this way. And so that is symbolically placed as well. Between the ranger there climbing and looking ahead toward victory and the victory represented by the arch, there are going to be a lot more of these graves because it's going to be a very costly last year of the war as well. The other thing I like to point out here at the top is the view, because you look across the memorial grounds over across Bedford County, you see 2 giant mountains. They're known as the Peaks of Otter, and they are in many ways symbolic of Bedford itself. It's the most notable landscape in town, and people from Bedford love those mountains. So let's go back to the Bedford Boys of Company A, 116th Regiment, 29th Division. When they left Bedford to join the Army in 1940, they left from a train station at the foot of those mountains. They had grown up beneath those mountains. They saw them every day on their way to school, went hunting and camping up there on those mountains. They love those mountains just like every other resident of Bedford. That is what they want to come home and see. Many of them, of course, don't get the chance. As I already said, 20 men from Bedford die on D-Day itself. Others died later in the campaign. Throughout the entire war, more than 130 men from Bedford died in World War II. And they never got the opportunity to come home and see that view that we can enjoy today. So I always like to tell people on their tours as we're wrapping up to turn around and take a look and enjoy the view for them. They paid with their lives so that we would live in a free country where we can gather and enjoy the view on a beautiful day like this. Well, that concludes our tour, and I hope you enjoyed it, saw a little bit of our site. As I said, there's a lot more, so I invite you to come back sometime when you can see it in person. But in the meantime, we'll hold it and answer any questions that have come in. And Maggie will check and see.
We'll see. Right now, I don't have any questions, but if you can put your questions within the Q&A feature, it's located at either the top or bottom of your screen inside of a box that says Q&A. So we'll be checking that to see what questions we get.
And while we're waiting, I'll point out something that's also not often known about D-Day. Many people know the date, June 6, 1944. Fewer people realize the date was supposed to be June 5th. On June 5th, when the invasion was scheduled to take place, a great storm came through the English Channel, and General Eisenhower reluctantly was forced to order a postponement for 24 hours to June 6th. Now, one advantage that the Allies had over the Germans was we had better weathermen. We could tell what the weather was going to be. And so while on June 6th, as the day is dawning, it's still a little bit stormy. The Germans are pretty confident that the invasion wouldn't be that day because the weather was too bad. However, our meteorologists had discovered that a clearing front was going to come through the channel about dawn. And so Eisenhower gave the order that we would commence Operation Overlord on June 6, 1944. And that goes down in history as D-Day.
So could you tell us what D-Day means?
Absolutely. Very good question. We get that a lot. D-Day, a lot of people think it stands for Doomsday or Destruction Day or Death Day. Really, the D doesn't stand for anything. D-Day is merely a military term for the day an operation starts. Every battle of World War II had a D-Day, but only the one on June 6, 1944 goes down in history as D-Day itself. But it doesn't really stand for anything. 2 days before the invasion is D-2. 5 days afterwards is D+5. So what is the actual day of an invasion? Simply D-Day. It starts at H out. But the D really, if it stands for anything, stands for day. It's just a military term for the start of an operation. Well, again, we want to thank you for coming out and joining our tour. And there's a lot more to the history of D-Day. If you want to read about it, many books are available. Our webpage, www.dday.org, has many resources available, not just for students, but also for teachers that teach this subject. And also, you'll find on our webpage a list of some of our other upcoming virtual programs. While we're closed, like so much else in the rest of the nation during the coronavirus crisis, we are trying to offer as much as we can online to be sure that our message gets out. We're here to pay tribute to the legacies and lessons of D-Day, and we're doing that online these days more than we can do in person. So I invite you to check out our webpage and learn more. And after you read up on it, if you have any other questions about D-Day, feel free to email myself, Maggie, at education@dday.org, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. But we certainly thank you for joining us and hope you'll join us for one of our other virtual programs coming up soon.